Dear ladies and gentlemen, so a week ago, the world celebrated International Women's Day. This year, the United Nations commemorated it under the theme Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And I would like to quote the IFC Managing Director and Executive Vice President, Mahta Diop, who said that every day that an entrepreneur faces limited job choices based on their gender is a day we all lose out. Addressing the gender gap is even more urgent in the wake of COVID-19, which dealt a major blow to the gender equity progress made around the world in recent years. The pandemic forced countless women out of the labor market and into unpaid care work. And supporting women-owned businesses and female entrepreneurs will be essential to ensuring an equitable, sustainable, and resilient recovery. Having said that, I would like to invite the IFC Forefront gender practitioner who leads the Women in Work program in Sri Lanka, Sarah Twigg. Sarah is a gender, employment, and private sector specialist. She is leading IFC's gender work to close gender gaps and advance business outcomes and economic development. Sarah has over 15 years of the private sector and international development experience, including UNDP and the World Bank. She is also a co-author of the 2014 World Bank Report on Women's Voice and Agency and 2 UNDP Human Development Reports. So Sarah, a big welcome to the GLC platform.
Very much, Anna, and hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I have to caveat that I am not the only gender specialist at the IFC. I am part of a team called the Gender and Economic Inclusion Group, and we have a team of people based in Washington, and then we also have a number of us who are based out in the regions. I am based in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, so saying hello to you all from there. So we might jump straight into the first slide, and I guess what I wanted to do was just to set the scene a little bit in terms of why, how gender is important for IFC, and then to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing in Sri Lanka, and in particular as it relates to access to finance for women's entrepreneurs. So gender is a strategic priority for IFC and for the World Bank Group. And tackling gender gaps is really fundamental to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's also really fundamental for development. It's also fundamental to achieving the World Bank Group's twin goals of eliminating extreme poverty by 2030 and by boosting shared prosperity. So it really undercuts everything that we do. And indeed, it undercuts all of our investment and advisory work. And we have, for example, targets around the proportion of IFC investments that should be gender flagged, as well as our advisory work. In addition to that, we also do thought leadership. So really looking at where are some of the forefront areas that we need to be thinking about gender gaps and inclusion gaps. We do direct gender interventions where we work directly at the country level or at the client level to address particular gender gaps. And we also work with our colleagues to integrate gender into the projects led by our other industry teams, for example, the infrastructure group or the manufacturing and agribusinesses services group. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective in terms of how we at IFC think about gender gaps. And we really think about gender gaps across these 5 different levels, if you like. So of course, one of the areas that we work on a lot is around the gap in terms of women's leadership. And in particular, we're looking here at women in corporate leadership, women on boards, and women in senior management. We also do a lot of work around the women as employees. And so this is really working in markets to close the gender gap in employment. So for example, in Sri Lanka, where I am, there's around 35% of women who formally work compared to 75% of men. So there's a really significant gap there. And we work directly with clients and at the sectoral level to try and close some of those gaps. We, of course, then work very closely on terms of closing gaps for women entrepreneurs, in particular around access to business skills and to training, as well as, of course, access to capital, technology, networks, markets, etc. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. We also then look at the lens of women as consumers. So how can the private sector better be serving women as customers, whether it's in terms of financial products or real sector products? So we do a lot of work with clients and in countries to help companies think about women as a specific market segment. And then finally, as women as community stakeholders. And this is particularly relevant when we're thinking about things like infrastructure projects or other projects that really have a material impact at the community level. So if we go to the next slide. So in Sri Lanka, we have the largest, IFC's largest country-based gender program. And what's kind of interesting about this is that we're working across a whole range of different gender gaps across the private sector. So we're working on women's employment, we're working on women's leadership, we're working on entrepreneurship, particularly through the lens of women-owned businesses in supply chains. And then we're of course doing a lot of work around closing financing gaps and financial inclusion. So this is one of the three core pillars that we work on under the Women in Work program in Sri Lanka, which is a 6-year partnership with the Government of Australia. So if we go to the next slide, really, I mean, when we think about women as entrepreneurs, and this will not be new to any of you, I'm sure, you know, we know that globally women own around about 1/3 of small and medium enterprises in emerging markets. In Sri Lanka, it's about 25%, so a little bit below the average. But we also know that access to finance is one of the biggest barriers to women entrepreneurs growing their businesses. And I think that the latest figures estimate that the funding gap for women entrepreneurs is around about $1.5 trillion globally. So there's a really significant funding gap there, and it's really fundamental in terms of helping those businesses grow. Next slide. And really, I mean, there are multiple barriers that are limiting women-owned businesses accessing financing tools and services. What we often find is that gender-neutral financing programs, which is, you know, or financial products, which is what is the norm, they tend to actually prevent women from accessing products and services. So at IFC, what we do is we work with banks, with financial institutions, with insurance companies to help them create targeted strategies for how they can better serve women customers, and in particular, how they can better serve women small business customers. And so this is just one example of a bank that we've worked with here in Sri Lanka, where we helped them to design this strategy to think about women as a holistic market segment, think about how they can be better serving the specific needs of what women, in this case, business owners needed. And what we saw in that case was a 36% increase in the value of loans that bank was issuing to women. And so it was a really material increase, obviously, which is really positive for the bank because that's a huge pool of new customers for them as well. And then when we think about the constraints to women accessing finance, you know, there are obviously issues around lack of access to collateral. And so globally, we know women own only around 1% of land. So that's a really material constraint to being able to access financing. And then, you know, where risk analysis and other credit analysis are not looking at alternative forms of collateral. And so one of the things that we do with our clients is we help them think about collateral differently. We help them look at, you know, different ways of assessing risk. And this question of risk, we also see really a lot of gender bias in terms of the evaluation of risk and the perception of risk. And I was even having a conversation today with a female business owner in Switzerland who was just doing some capital raising. And she said she experienced this very much herself, that there was this real risk aversion among the financial institutions that she was talking to. And so, you know, women-owned businesses tend to be a market segment that most banks don't know a lot about. They don't tend to have good data. And so they find it very difficult to adequately calculate that risk. Again, there's this challenge around banks generally and financial institutions not taking a customized approach to how they're serving women. And so, you know, not thinking about women as a specific market segment, but rather just thinking about their portfolio holistically. But equally, and I think this is something that we'll hear a lot more about during the session, is the challenges in terms of non-financial barriers. And particularly what we find is, you know, limited skills in terms of business management, in terms of networking, in terms of financial management, in terms of how do you, develop a coherent business plan. These are all things that really materially impact women business owners from accessing formal financing. And so we'll go to the next slide. In this context, what we do in the Sri Lankan context is we have a specific project that we delivered through our banks, through the banks that we work with and other financial institutions, to deliver small business training to their small business customers, with a really specific focus on the women in their portfolio, but also beyond just their existing portfolio. So looking out to other women business owners in the market, how they can provide this very targeted business training to help upskill those business owners to be able to be more, more efficient and more sustainable in terms of the way they run their business. In parallel with that, we've also been working with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to help them develop and roll out their national financial inclusion strategy. Now, as a part of the implementation of that, we have been working with local partners to deliver digital business training for women SMEs. And what I'm going to leave you with just at the end of my presentation is a short video of one woman who has participated in this business training and the impact that it's having on her business.
ලක්ෂ්මී රණරාජ මගේ ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු ආරම්භ කළ මම දැන් වර්ෂ 7ක් විතර වෙනවා. මම ව්‍යාපාරය වශයෙන් ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙන නානකාම්බර කට්ටල සහ ඒ අමතර කොටස්. ඒක මට ලොකු අභියෝගයක් වුණා. මොකද නානකාම්බර කට්ටල සහ මේ අමතර කොටස් සහ ගොඩනැගිලි ද්‍රව්‍ය අලෙවි කිරීම ගොඩක් වෙලාවට පුරුෂ පක්ෂය තමයි ඒ ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු නියැලෙන්නේ. නමුත් මම කාන්තාවක් විදිහට මේක මම කොහොමද මේ අභියෝගය ජයගන්නේ කියලා මේ ව්‍යාපාරය තුළ මම ගොඩක් දේවල් ඉගෙන ගත්තා. කොරෝනා වසංගතයත් එක්කම මම හිතන්නේ අපි ගොඩක් ව්‍යාපාරික කටයුතු වලින් අපි මානසිකව වැටුණා. නමුත් මේ අතරතුර තමයි අපිට ජාත්‍යන්තර කාන්තා පදනමේ සභාපතිතුමිය මට දුරකථනයෙන් සම්බන්ධ වෙලා අපි කොහොමද ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු කරන්න කියන තැනට අපිව ගෙනාවේ. ජාත්‍යන්තර කාන්තා පදනමක් සමග සම්බන්ධ වෙලා යනකොට තමයි අපි ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු කරන කට්ටිය වර්ගීකරණයක් කරලා ඒ කට්ටියකින් පස් දෙනා කණ්ඩායම් කරලා තමයි අපි මේ IFC ආයතනය සමග මේ වැඩමුළු වලට සහභාගී කරගත්තේ. මම හිතන්නේ මේ තුලින් තමයි ආයතනවල ඉන්න දේශකයෝ අපිට සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන පැය එකමාරේ ඔන්ලයින් අපිව සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන අපිට තියෙන ගැටලු අපිව විග්‍රහ කරන ඒ වගේ මම දැනගෙන හිටියේ නෑ පේජ් එකක් කොහොමද හදන්නේ, ඒ වගේම ඔන්ලයින් අපි කොහොමද අපි බැංකුත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ, ඒ වගේම මේ ගිණුම්කරණය දැනගත්තත් දවස් අපි කොහොමද ඉදිරියට මේව පවත්වාගෙන යන්න කියන එක විශාල වශයෙන් මෙච්චරයි කියලා කියන්න බෑ. ඒ වටිනාකම ජාත්‍යන්තර කාන්තා පදනමෙන් තමයි අපිව IFC ආයතනයට සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන අපිට ලොකු දැනුමක් ලබා දුන්නේ. මම හිතන්නේ ආයතනයටත් අපි ගෞරවයෙන් ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. මම කරන ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු තියෙන්නේ සීලුම දේ විදේශ රටකින් ගෙන්වන්න. මොකද මේ රටේ නිෂ්පාදනය කරන දේවල් අඩු නිසා. ඒක නිසා මගේ එකම අරමුණ තමයි නානකාම්බරවල දොරක් නිෂ්පාදනය කරලා මගේ ව්‍යාපාරික නාමයත් එක්ක ඉදිරියට යන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ අපනයනය කරන්න. ඒක තමයි මගේ ඉදිරි සැලැස්ම. මම හිතන්නේ මම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා මම මෙතෙක් දුරට මාව සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන ලොකු දැනුමක් ලබා දීලා ව්‍යාපාරිකයෙක් විදිහට මේව ගොඩනගාගෙන අද තිබ්බ අඩියනේ මම හිතන්නේ මම දැන් අඩි 10ක් විතර ඉස්සරහට ඇවිල්ලා ඒ දේ මට කරලා දුන්නේ ජාත්‍යන්තර කාන්තා පදනමක් IFC ආයතනයක්.
Thanks very much. So I just really wanted to leave you with that as a bit of food for thought of some of the ways that we've been helping women business owners in Sri Lanka build their business capacity and the benefit that that's having for their businesses, for the way that they're managing their finances, and indeed for their ability to access more formal financing. So looking forward to a really interesting discussion, and thanks for having me.
Many thanks, Sarah. I would like really to express my appreciation for what your team has accomplished in Sri Lanka and in other countries to bring us closer to bridging gender gaps, improve working conditions, and creating job opportunities for all. So now I think it's time to move on to the main part of the webinar, or should I say the discussion that will be led by the IFC Master Trainer, Nneka Okekearu. So Nneka is a Deputy Director of the Enterprise Development Center at Penn Atlantic University. She has experience working on multiple programs, including gender programs, such as Sherry Blair Foundation for Women, such as Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Project in Nigeria and Liberia, World Bank's Women X program, and many others. And Nneka joins us today with two honorable guests. So first of all, Sholabi Akinpelu. She's the founder of Fables, a women-focused and inclusive fintech platform for the underserved and excluded women in Africa. As well as Ivana Osagi, she is the founder and the CEO of PWR Advisory, a leading Africa-focused diversity and inclusion consulting firm. Nneka, Sholabi, and Ivana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that. And it's a pleasure to be on this platform. I'd like to thank all our guests that have logged in from all over. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what continent and time zone that you're on. Thank you very much, Sholabi and Ivana, for joining us on this platform to have this conversation around women and funding and all the issues in between. So it's a pleasure to have both of you here. So Anna, thank you so much for that. I think just before we start the conversation, I'd like to ask Sholabi and Ivana, how did they get into what they're doing currently? In just a minute, tell us their background and exactly what it is that they do. So we know Harvest is a tech platform. Actually, Sholabi and Ivana, for the benefit of the listeners, are wearing multiple hats. So yes, they're women, they're also entrepreneurs, and they're doing a lot of great things. But I just wanted to use a minute each to share briefly their background and exactly what it is that they're doing with their platform. Over to you, Sholabi.
All right. Thank you so much, Nneka, and good day, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Briefly, what we do at Harvest is driving digital financial inclusion for women on both sides of the divide. That is, women in urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. And how do we do this? We do that by giving them greater familiar access to savings, impact investments, and credit. Well, why Harvest? For about 12 years, I worked on a lot of financial brands. My background actually is in marketing, and working on those brands, digging into insights, showed that the face of financial of the financial inclusion of the gaps in it, the face is female, because anytime you look at the statistics, you realize that the gap, the statistics has more, female excluded. And going further, we realized that a lot had been done in research, in white paper. A lot had been done, and no one was going to just do something about it. And that was why we started Harvest, to close the economic gender gap through means that I mentioned before. At the moment, savings, impact investments, and credit, but credit particularly for smallholder female farmers in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sholabi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Lovely to be here. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. I'd like to thank Nneka for having me here, and Anna, and also commend the IFC and the World Bank for all the great work you do, supporting women. And I think it's in everybody's interest, actually, when women will win, the whole world wins, because women have a very transformative impact on society. So my name is Ivana Osage. I am an angel investor. I sit on the board of a network of female angel investors called Rising Tide Africa. So what we do is that we pool our resources, and that's our capital, our time, and our networks as well, to create opportunities for female entrepreneurs. We also fund some male entrepreneurs as well. And in so doing, we also create wealth for ourselves. We know that the more women we have allocating capital, the more access to capital that female entrepreneurs have. So it's a very, it's a cycle, if you like. And then the other hat I wear is that I run a diversity and inclusion consulting firm. And we operate across a number of diversity dimensions. So primarily gender diversity, but also generational diversity. We look at also people living with disabilities and ethnic diversity. One thing we do is that we work with organizations to help them build more inclusive spaces so that everybody thrives in the workplace. And we have a women in leadership program that we run with organizations as well to help get more women into leadership in the private sector, because we also know that has a transformative impact. And then we do a lot of research and put a lot of reports and data mining in the area of diversity and inclusion. And just 2 weeks ago, we released a report, the guide to leading more, to beating bias, unconscious bias, and leading more inclusively. So that's what I do for my day job. Thank you, Nneka.
Oh, wow. I begin to imagine what the night job is all about, Ivana. Wow. So it promises a very interesting conversation. Thank you for that. Okay. So both of you have a lot of experience in working with entrepreneurs. So what has been your experience generally working with female entrepreneurs in your respective ecosystems?
Right. So I think she's muted.
You're muted. Shalaka, you're muted.
Thank you. So in our case, because the female entrepreneurs we work with usually, they are female farmers, actually, smallholder female farmers, especially in the northern part, in northern Nigeria. So there's a lot of divides going on. There's a lot of gaps in knowledge, in digitalization, right? And so while we have women on the other side who save and impact invest in these women, that is almost no brainer. It's just like easy peddling. But you realize that the average smallholder female farmer is not even aware of her own limitations, is not fully aware. Yeah, I think fully is a key word there, of her own limitations and her ills, right? So female farmers make up about 75% of the entire rural of the entire labor population in Nigeria. 75%, that's a bulk, right? But only 10% of funding, for instance, that is structured funding, goes to the female farmer. 90% goes to the 25% of men in that population. I don't think I've ever seen such, lopsidedness and imbalance before. And what these women, do they realize? No, because they easily, when first off, their labor is limited to just labor. They don't do farming as a business. They are limited to subsistence farming. And that was what I meant when I said that a lot of them are not even aware. So there's a knowledge gap. They are not aware that they are, they are underwhelmed, right? They are underwhelmed. Then secondly, they lack the social permission, okay? Go to where these fundings, or to go to organizations and associations where these fundings are distributed. When you have, let's say, some intervention funds coming into those parks, for instance, the women is, aside from what she does, on her husband's, most of the time the field is even for the man, right? she's back home with a lot of unpaid care, you know, running her time, billable hours, doing that. And then it's the men that have the permission, the social permission, as I said, and all of these things are not expressly stated in many cases to go to such events. So again, most of these women, most of these rural entrepreneurs are not aware of their own ills and are not aware of the challenges. And from awareness comes, you know, the determination and the identification of opportunities when you see them. So what we do, back to your question, that is a major issue we, you know, highlighted with the rural female farmers that we work with. A lot of them are not aware, and then of course there's the place of, you know, digital divide too, where they have phones, their phones are limited to feature phones. In some cases, they do not have phones. When you need their numbers, they give you the numbers of their spouses for people, for women that are in relationships. So these are some challenges with them, and then it makes adoption and interventions, you know, quite harder to penetrate and to distill. But of course, down the line, I can talk about, you know, some brilliant ways that we are using to demystify and make sure that these interventions go deep. Again, how does that affect, you know, the financial differences? First, what happens is that, and the analogy I usually use is, you know, you buy a machinery, and that machinery can, for instance, give you, you know, produce, let's say 26 pallets of ice daily. But this machinery consumes the same level or the same amount of power. This consumes about the same amount of space, but because it probably needs servicing or only some part of it is working, instead of giving you like 100, it's giving you like 50. And that's how the economic gender gap is. When a side is underwhelmed, that is women, we're talking about 75% of the entire farming population in Nigeria, for instance. When they are underwhelmed, when they don't get the right funding, when they don't get the right inputs, when they don't get the right funding at the right time, what it does is that it weakens and minimizes the entire output of such sectors. And then it also minimizes their own levels of economic participation. And, you know, it becomes, that's why I say it's an economic issue. It is not a gender issue. If these women have enough, if they move upwards the, you know, economic ladder, it then strengthens us as a people. And we all know that women, they give back. They give back. So whatever they get earned, you know, given, it goes back into community. So it's not a gender conversation. And those are the issues we typically see with these women: knowledge gap, digital gap, and then of course they are mostly financially limited. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Shalakwe, for that. So not being aware, digital device, and the lack of social permission as well. You had mentioned that. Okay. Thank you. How about you, Ivana? What are some of the experiences that you've had in dealing with female entrepreneurs? And I also know that Ivana is a co-founder of Rising Tide, and Rising Tide it's an angel investment group based out of Nigeria that focuses on female entrepreneurs. So I'm sure you have some experiences to share.
Yes. I think I would say that the experience we've had with female entrepreneurs has been very positive. We find that the female entrepreneurs are very courageous. As an entrepreneur in this part of the world, it's tough. They encounter lots of challenges, but I think the hurdles are even more for the women among them because of the cultural norms and because of the prejudice and bias that typically exist. Nonetheless, the women continue to excel. So we have people like Tenya Giwa, for instance, who runs Life Bank, you know, who pioneered that. And we saw all of the work that she did during the early days of the COVID epidemic, where she was ensuring that people had access to blood, but even went further than that and set up an oxygen bank as well, because we know that was one of the interventions that was required during COVID-19. We also have someone like, somebody's hand is up. Does Anna want to say something? I saw her hand just go up. We also saw Tomilola Adejano of Bankley, who works in the fintech space. She's working on financial inclusion solutions, and they raised about $2 million US. I think that was about 2 years ago for her startup. We also have another entrepreneur, well, a set of 3 female entrepreneurs I work with in the agricultural space. They run a company called Amai. So the women are doing great. Some of the challenges they face, Shalakwe has already enumerated. A large part of it really is about the gender bias and the prejudice that they encounter, which is a limiting factor and can be a door closer rather than a door opener. So these are some of the challenges they face, but nonetheless, I find that they're very courageous. They're working extra hard, and I would say that they need all the support they can get, because we know that the impact they have on the economy is tremendous.
Okay, awesome. So thank you very much for that. So what are some of the common fallacies that you probably had heard or come in contact with as both of you prepared to venture into that space? So that's the space of providing funding and capital to female entrepreneurs. So there's some things that you might have heard. Could you share with us some of the common fallacies as regards
Yes.
funding females?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think she can, she's the one that does the funding.
Ivana, yeah, so Ivana is gonna, that question is for her.
Yes, but I mean, I think you can look at it from both perspectives. So you can look at it from the perspective.
Shalabi, can you hear her? I think maybe it's from my end.
No, I can't.
No, I
I
think
think
we
it's from my end. I think we lost it.
Ivana.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll just take that while she comes on then.
Yes.
So the question is, what are the
Common fallacies. Common fallacies.
Common fallacies. Oh yeah, common
Yeah.
fallacies. And I'll tell
As
you
regards funding females. Yeah.
yes, around funding females. And this, I'll say a lot of the fallacies are not even spoken, are not even, established, but they are implicit. Okay. I'll talk about 2 of them. One is implicit, the other, we see it and we still do not recognize it. The first one, which is very implicit and not very understated, but happens is, especially in this part, right, where there are stereotyped gender roles. As a woman, you're meant to, and these are realities actually. Ivana mentioned the resilience of women globally, and that is something that's quite commendable. I think it even comes naturally. So I've seen a lot of men, and statistics have it too, that women are great multitaskers. That's why we're doing so many things at the same time, and the ball's no ball is dropping. So then there comes the expected role that as a woman, or let me just say that as an African woman or a Nigerian woman, your place is in the home. Why are you out? Why are you aspiring so much? Why are you overachieving so much, right? And in many cases I've seen men indicate, what's the word now, right, just act so. I was on this conversation the other day and I said that, I don't mind me, I have some conversations in my head, and I didn't realize that on time, but I knew men that, for instance, our startup Harvest, what we do anytime we mention it, people go like, whoa, I've never seen anyone crack the code, about financial inclusion for both sides of the divide at the same time. That's intense and all of that. And I know people that we went out into the market, we started raising together, and I've seen businesses, male-led businesses, raise. And you come back and say, wait a minute, I thought everybody said this is a smart idea. I thought everybody said the world needed this. So what exactly could be happening? And I'm not saying that these are the facts, but these are things that are based on my experiences and my opinion. First off, the guy mostly sees deals, relates with these investors, with the funders in informal ways, right? So when I finish from work, I go back home, that guy goes to the polo club, goes to the golf club, goes to the right? And while over long tennis they discuss business, it's easier, they're relaxed, and they probably understand more. Then the following morning I pick up my laptop and I start code mailing these same guys, right? Which is, dear so, I am so. And that's not even to mention the number of times that a lot of people, have replied emails, replying me with sir. I do not believe, I don't understand why, they just expect that as a CEO or the face of a CEO, should be a man. So these are some embedded biases that, as a woman, your place should do. Why should you be going door to door requesting for funds when really, where are your children? Do you have children? You're supposed to be married. 30 is the age, your biological clock, and so many other, untold implicit biases. As Ivana rightly said, biases and prejudices. Now, having said that, the second thing is this recent thing where everybody wants to mentor a female CEO. And it is good. Mentoring is great. As a matter of fact, I'm heavy on mentoring, both forward and reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring especially. A lot of people around me are younger than me in experience and all of that, and I learn a lot from them. It puts me on trends and world activities. But then, just like a founder friend of mine would say, like, give us the money. Let's make the mistakes. Let's fail fast. Let's fail quickly, right? I mean, everybody says, oh, you need mentoring. And then it goes back to my first point. Is it because we probably feel like women are not as efficient? For instance, Tommy, who was mentioned before, is running a huge business. She raised the other time. You can see how much she's doing, with the funding. There are tons of women that are doing well. So why should we be recommended for mentoring, and over mentoring? If you mentor us all the time and we do not get the check, how exactly? I think Ivana is here and needs our attention. Right. So yeah, so those are the biases that I've experienced, and we do not realize how these things creep up. That is for funders, for influencers too, because of course we know the due diligence happens and all of that. And even for the fundees, that is for female entrepreneurs, right? So it then means that you want to break the code in some way, you want to network more, and of course, you want to have more female funders. And I'll still talk about that as things go on, because again, there are some things that you just probably will not get. Not because you're not compassionate, but because you probably will not get. I was at a UN Women event 2 days ago, and we're pitching live, and someone pitched, went on. It was a homemade goods, and it was our 2 daughters that started the business, and there were two founders, and went on, and the female, she got it. What's her name? Yeah, Jen. And she got it, and the guy said, you know why? You know what? This is why we need more female funders. This is why we need more female-led VCs. Why we need more female angels like Ivana and the likes. Because he was gracious enough to admit that he didn't get the idea, and that if you had come to him alone, he would have just, say, sorry, but I don't get it. So, and I cannot. Meanwhile, the other lady, could relate, saw the benefits, saw the reason why she should be funded. So it's a chicken and egg situation for both sides of the divide, overcoming these biases and of course cracking the code.
All right, thank you very much. So Mark, Ivana can't unmute herself. Can you please assist with that? So just before I ask another question, ask Sholakwe or Ivana when she gets back. So I have this question now for the audience, for the other participants. How many of us know somebody, a female entrepreneur, that has tried to access funding? So just by...
That has driven access to funding, is that the question?
That knows a female entrepreneur that has accessed funding.
Oh, yeah, Ivana mentioned earlier.
No, I wanted to just hear from the participants, just make sure that they're here with us. So by show of hands, so this question is actually for all the participants that have logged in from Bucharest, from Lagos, Nigeria, from Kenya. Do you know anybody, any female entrepreneur that had tried to access funding in your country, and how was that experience? So you can just do a show, put your hand up, electronic hand up, if if you do know, or you can drop that in the chat box. Okay, Selma says yes. Timothy says yes. Okay. So just 2 people. So the next question I have is that how easy was it to access that funding for their business? Okay, so Amra says she's been bootstrapping. Okay. Has it been, how easy was it to access that funding? So Isioma, Purity, Amara, Irene, Adiola, was it easier for the female entrepreneur to access than a male entrepreneur that you know?
Perhaps if someone would like
Just
to
trying
speak
to
up,
feel the pulse of it.
raise your
Yes.
hand and we'll unmute you. I also see that there was a comment from George.
From George.
George, maybe you would like to?
Yes. Yes, I'm going to comment on that. Just one. Okay. So while we're waiting for them, I don't know whether they're shy. So Adiola, Irene, Amra, Isioma, Purity. Okay. So but while we're waiting for them to put their hands up or drop their answers, so George has a question. He says, I would be relevant to know the causes. Okay, he wants to know the causes what's causing the gender gap and the women discrimination. That he thinks that the main cause generating the gap is related to the specific conditions in each country, but the common cause would be around the poverty situation that consequently triggers the women exclusion from the public system of education and implicitly to functional illiteracy, financial illiteracy, and exclusion from financing. Okay, so George is saying that poverty is a trigger. In addition, he says, I think poverty is the main reason leading to the lack of access to education and to finance. Otherwise, all these programs are very good and the initiators deserve to be congratulated. But I think these programs must be complemented by wide national programs aimed at combating poverty and at improving the national education system. So that's from George Florence Saifu. I think, George, if I'm correct, you're from Romania. So that's coming all the way to us from Bucharest in Romania. Okay. So you got that that comment or question from George, and I'm happy that Ivana is back with us. Samuel says in Mozambique, women usually get commercial loans for business under government or NGO grants. Without this, support is typically not easy. Okay. Ivana, you're back. Happy to have you back.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
All right. So you're about to just talk to us about the fallacies as it concerns funding female entrepreneurs.
I was about to talk about what I didn't hear you. Could you say that again, please?
The common fallacies.
Oh, fallacies, yes. I was talking about how women get told when they go to look for funding, you don't need to be. I mean, sometimes they get told, why are you working? You have a husband who can look after you. Your husband can meet all of your needs. And then also what we find is that some investors feel that women are risk averse. So they feel that women don't like to take risk. And therefore they may not make good bets because it means that they're not very aggressive in their expectations. I think, those are all, I would say that those are all as a result of ignorance and, again, gender bias and prejudice. And one big thing that we think we ought to focus on really is on providing unconscious bias and training to people and teaching people how to be more intentional about being inclusive, because inclusion will not happen by default. You actually have to work at inclusion. We all have biases. It doesn't make us bad people. It's just the way that we're wired, right? Because the brain takes these shortcuts when it has to deal with a lot of information. And so these shortcuts sometimes result in stereotypes and mental models which are inaccurate, and they drive our biases. So we need to be aware. Even as women, sometimes you take the Harvard Implicit Association test, which is a test for checking out your biases, you'd be surprised to find that even us women also have these biases where we think that certain occupations, for instance, or certain roles are male roles and women should not be playing those roles. And so they drive our actions, our thinking, and our decision making. And it affects women ultimately when they go out there seeking opportunities, knocking on doors, it affects them. And so these are areas that we really need to be proactive about dealing with. And I want to say that I think the IFC is doing a great job. I'm aware of some projects they have where they are working with some of the commercial banks in this part of the world, trying to help them de-bias their processes and also the structures they have to ensure that they produce, that they have a more conducive environment for women when they come knocking on doors seeking funding. I think that the more we do that, and the more we actually measure what we're doing and measure impact, it'll have a big impact. It will have a big impact. And then the other thing that needs to happen is that we need to have more women making these investment decisions and allocating capital, because like I said, when women are doing that, it means that other women have more access, because research shows that a woman is twice as likely to fund a female founder, for instance, than a man would be. We know that when a female entrepreneur, female founder goes to pitch to male investors, the sort of questions they ask them are very different from the sort of questions they ask the male founders. So with the men, they're asking them about, growth, I would say growth-related questions. What are your projections for the next 10 years? With a woman, they're asking, how are you going to make sure that you're not going to lose any customers? So it's all very limiting language when they're talking to women, right? And yes, you complain that women are risk averse, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit them and trying to point out all the risks when they come knocking on the doors. The men typically don't understand the sort of products and services sometimes that women's businesses are based on. So they're not really very interested in listening to them. I could go on, but let me stop. Maybe I'll have a chance to come back to talk some more about some of these things later.
All right. Thank you very much, Ivana. And you mentioned something. So we're all here on the IFC GLC platform. Majority of us here in the learning and development space. So I'm a learning and development professional. So this question is to both of you now. So both of you entrepreneurs doing the work that you're doing. Where do you see learning and development in all this? So from the perspective of working with the corporate, from the perspective of working with the entrepreneurs, what role does L&D play in helping bridge some of this gap? So that's the both of you. So maybe Sholaka, you want to go first?
So I think without L&D, our jobs are not even started as entrepreneurs, especially in the gender space, right? It's the mark, right? In short, it's not even the mark. It's the changing room. It's where you get prepared for the race, right? Because I remember vividly. So my case, we started Harvest. We registered 2019, but Harvest was conceived way back 2016, and we had like 3 years of thorough research, between those periods. And that's why I say this space, we understand it, right? A lot of, everything we did, the identity, rolling out everything, right? It was thoroughly researched. And again, that is the purpose of L&D. And then it does not stop. You continue, look at the trends and all of that. And of course, I also noticed, with organizations like the IFC, the EDC, which we are very, very grateful for. We're seeing loads of intervention for entrepreneurs like us, especially in the early stages. For instance, Harvest is a beneficiary, of one of such programs where we were able to, come in, get to learn a lot. Of course, yes, we did L&D, but hey, what about corporate governance? What about your accounting, for instance, which we're very, very grateful for, again, to the EDC, right? And so the place of L&D cannot be overstated or overemphasized in these challenges. And I think what I also see, the gap that I see now, is having fresh data. For instance, I know that we talk about funding, as women in tech director, for instance, the other day we're talking, and then representation for girls in STEM is about 15%. And I said, wait a minute, when was the last time this data was pulled, right? You know, so if we're still talking about data dated 4 years ago, now what had happened to all of the progressive actions, all of the affirmative actions that were taken in this space, you know, for girls in STEM, for financial inclusion and all of that. So we and I don't know if the organization's doing this already, like we need real-time data, you know, for all of this as well. But then again, L&D is the bedrock, you know, of all that we do. And of course, we need more cooperation between, you know, the fielders, the field people, and then, of course, the researchers, because that is only when we can achieve real-time, you know, progress and also track the same.
All right. Thank you very much, Shalakwe. Okay. And how about you, Ivana? I think we need to raise our voice because I can see George is saying he can't really hear very well what we're saying.
Okay, so I'm leaning in. I hope George, you can hear me better now. I'm leaning into my machine. The role of L&D, learning and development, is really about changing people's lenses through which they see the world. And I think when somebody walks into a learning and development platform, they should be able to walk out more enlightened. And part of this enlightenment has to do again with what I already talked about, which is about helping people become more aware of their own biases. We all have them. And one thing is to be aware. The other thing is then when we are aware, what do we do next? So it's helping people to understand that we have to be more careful to pause and think and ask ourselves questions, challenge our assumptions, for instance, challenge your thinking. You know, why? So for instance, when a female entrepreneur stands in front of me, the way that I react to her, would I be reacting to a male entrepreneur in the same way? Asking yourself these questions, pausing for thought, and being open to external perspective, not just seeing things through the same old lens, but actually, I can see that George is saying something again. Message has gone. Being able to see through other people's lenses, to understand the world from different perspectives. I think that's something that L&D can do to challenge the people who come through into our training programs, and also helping them to understand that you know, by getting more women involved the research from McKinsey tells us, I think, that about $316 billion will be added to Africa's GDP if we had more women involved in economic activities. The AFDB also tell us that there's a $42 billion funding gap between male and female entrepreneurs, and obviously the women have the short straw. So that means that by bridging that $42 billion gap, we would have over a 700% increase or returns on our investment. So, you know, by not involving women, we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot, because everybody would benefit. The GDP would grow, investors would also make more money. So I think these are some of the perspective that the L&D community can bring to the table, helping people to become more aware, like Shalakwe said, about the data and about the business case for greater financial inclusion for women.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So there was a recent report by Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, EFINA, that showed that out of the 36% of Nigerian adults that remain completely financially excluded, majority of that group were women. What are some of the things that we can start to think about to do to carry more women along? So we're talking about funding female entrepreneurs. If we have, you know, close to 30% of Nigerian adults that are financially excluded, that are women, that's a big deal. So if they're already financially excluded, how much more would they have access to funding, to also, so what are some of the things we need to start to think about to do to carry more women along?
If you want to catch fish, you don't look in the air, you look in the water. So you have to go to where the women are. Take your products and services to where the women are, right? And meet them at their points of need, meet them where their constraints are. That's number one. Number two, I think we need to target a lot more of our consumer research on women, right? Research tells us, for instance, that 60 to 80% of consumer buying decisions are made by women. Women have a lot more buying power. So we need to start to understand how a female consumer thinks so that we develop our products and services to suit a woman where she's at, rather than building the space and then getting the woman to come and conform to the shape of the space. Let's actually go and understand what women want. How does it make a woman's mind work? And then let's build products and services that are tailored to meet women where they're at. So in a nutshell, that would be my answer, Nneka.
Okay, I'll try to lean into that, and that's it. That's the answer. We need to go towards or go where these women are. And that is not necessarily geographical, right? It's in terms of mind, in terms of psychographics. Where is this person? What is the life stage? What are the pain points, as we say, in marketing? What are the passion points? And then we need to be more creative too, okay? And that's why, when we say women are financially underserved and excluded, a lot of people be like, what a minute, what do you mean they are financially underserved or excluded? A woman, for instance, going back to the female farmers, who customarily cannot inherit land as it is, as we know, as it stands, right? And meanwhile, land is a primary component of farming, yeah? So what it means is that you've, removed a major component of productivity from her. And okay, she needs to go to the bank, right? The bank requires land as collateral. Okay, so that woman cannot even build credit, let alone access credit. Has she been excluded systematically or not? Certainly, yes. Right? And those are, what Harvest is solving for in these areas. That is, we impute finance. You need land, you have the expertise. Where they don't even have the expertise, not even where, in all of our interventions, it's blended financing we offer them anyways. So we give them linkages to trainings, because a lot of them are just recycling the same thing. So we finance your training, we project finance, and then we connect you to premium markets. And that way we have helped you build credit. We've helped you access credit. We've helped you become even more economically viable. And by the way, we always say that we are not here to manage poverty. So back to what I think was George that mentioned, financial literacy. It is a major key. And it's entirely different from having a PhD holder, or how much more people what is financial literacy to, a female farmer who probably does not even know how to read and write. And now, because I'm a certified financial educator myself, before, our curriculum for these women farmers used to be agronomy practices, business practices, and all of that. Just recently, we developed a brand new curriculum. We knew that it's not been done before. No playbooks. Who teaches, an average farmer who doesn't read or write, financial literacy. So we made a language-based curriculum on financial literacy, understanding credits. Some of them, most of the time, before harvest, and that's when we pitch, we said this is our competition is the local money lender, who lends to these women at exorbitant rates, right? Anyways, and then these women are forced between having a first sale or paying back, and then they just keep digging further down the poverty line. So we teach them the credit, and you see like aha moments, okay? And then so after giving them these credit lines, 1, 2, 3, we expect that should be able to save. No, so how do they save? A lot of them, are not lettered, but we realize that they don't have smartphones. However, they have feature phones, and we are working on a solution, to address that at the moment. So that is the place of L&D, real data, testing, and all of that. And then we are able to include these women. And of course, on the other side, that is the supply side, we have financial literacy. You go to harvest.ng now, you see tons of, resources. We have sessions, and, people like, oh my God, where have I been? Talk about, saving, impact investment itself, credit, tax, and all of that. We are always offering the women. So financial literacy is very, very key. And you realize that while it is really, really it is essential for humans, both male and female. A lot of women are less financially literate, and statistics are, backs this. My experience working with financial brands, backs this, because when it comes to, finances, it's usually left for the man to, make all of those decisions. It's stereotypically, left for them. So you realize that otherwise it doesn't matter if you give $1 billion whatever to someone, the person just carousels it, the one that falls off, and they are not able to multiply or manage the money without financial literacy. Away from that, I think another thing that we also need to critically think about, I do not really have the answer, is yes, women will drive consumerism, but whose card are we swiping in most cases, right? So that's another consideration. Is it our money in those cases, or we are just, who makes the money, who spends the money? It's another thing. And that's why we need all of these conversations and a strong balance.
I think Sholakwe made it.
Yes.
I think Sholakwe touched on a very important point. The fact of the sort of financial products that are out there. A lot of these products are based on collateral, and most of the time it's usually landed assets. And we know that a lot of times women are locked out of access to these landed assets that will help them get collateral from the bank. But we also know that women are safer bets. I mean, women have much higher repayment rates, for instance, than men do. And I'm not taking a pot at men, but women's repayment rates are higher. They're lower risk, but because they're not able to, provide a house, provide land as collateral, they're locked out of, the financing cycle, and therefore they don't have the benefit. They don't enjoy the benefits of the fact that they're a safer bet than the men are. So I think the work that the IFC does is very important, because they're helping to de-risk the process and the financing mechanisms for women. We must find innovative ways of being able to lend to women that does not require them to provide landed assets as collateral. So it could be I'm not a banker. It could be, for instance, her credit history. It could be, for instance, her revenues. But we must find ways to help the banks to manage the risk better, so that women have greater access to funding.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. As we're just talking and sharing, my mind takes me to Purity. So Purity is signing in from Kenya, in East Africa. And she shared that her friend was required to have her husband sign up the approval form for her before she could access the funding. Now, if that was not enough, in addition, she also had to wait 3 months vetting period, which didn't make any sense, because, the opportunity you needed that money for probably would be gone in all that. So we have that. We have a situation whereby, just like Sholakwe talked about, in certain regions, women cannot own land. And if I use my country as an example, in Nigeria, if I marry a foreigner, if I marry somebody that is from the United States and we move to Nigeria, he cannot automatically become a Nigerian citizen. However, were my husband to be Nigerian and I was from, I don't know, Ukraine or somewhere, automatically I would become a Nigerian. Women cannot bail. If somebody gets into trouble and is locked up, a woman cannot go and sign for bail in most instances in the country. So now my question is, what is the role of media? What do we do about culture? These two things, as well as getting more women into policy making as a way to bridge this gap. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that's, we could talk about it. But it's also very topical, because we see what's been happening in the political space over the last few weeks. And the women, we're still protesting. I'm part of a group that is very much involved in what's happening. We actually need change, right? I think very important, we must be allies. We must cultivate relationships to get the men to become allies. We must involve the men in the conversations. It's pointless women talking to women about these issues, because the women are already converted. We must build those relationships. I think as women, we need to be very strategic in our networking, build relationships with men, create safe spaces where we can have these conversations, educate them, challenge them. And for the women amongst us who are leaders and operate at very senior levels, let's use our privilege and our influence to talk to our male peers, because some of them, they're blockers not because they want to, but because they actually don't understand what the issues are. So we must raise their awareness and educate them. And when we need to, we must challenge them. But let's be allies as women. Let's work together. Let's also encourage the men to be allies for women. It's a lot stronger when you have a man advocating for a woman than a woman advocating for herself. If we had more male allies in the National Assembly speaking up for these issues, we wouldn't be where we are today. Those bills would have gone through. So we need to build those relationships. And we build a relationship before we need them, right? It's like a bank account. You have to put money in before you need to take money out. So those are some of the solutions that I would prefer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's 100 actually. We don't need to convince ourselves. I mean, the women, we are already convinced. We just need to, raise strong allies and, cut these relationships too. Because who writes the code? Who writes the code? So we could go on and, do hashtags. Tons of hashtags have been done. Me too. Really glorious, gracious movements. But how much has it gotten us? So we could go on and get red in the face, and but we should recognize and have these conversations with the people that can actually move the needle for us and cause the changes that we want to see. Yes, and I think that again, when it comes to equality and equity, I see some conversations that are still, and it comes to the biases again, even the self biases, the unconscious ones. I think it's the UNDP statistics that has it that 91% of men globally establish at least one bias against, women. But that's not the news. 87% of women, establish the same, indicated at least one bias against women. And so 87, 91, just look at the difference. So it means that we are all together in this bias thing, right? And how does the media shape that? In cases where we've seen women propose and say, you know what, we need this equality, you then see some women say, oh, I should be able to do this, I should be able to do that. But then again, in another flip, or, within one breast, they still feel like, I should still go back to cultural roles, and a man should still take some cultural roles, right? So these are also challenges that could be culturally based. And so we certainly need to, identify benchmarks for equality personally, and then what it should be on a general front. And I believe that the media has a strong role in what we are exposed to, in what they show, and in how we individually consume the media as well.
All right, thank you very much. So we still have some time in case there are specific questions for Sholakwe or Ivana, but I'm going through the chat box now. So George is asking again. No, so before George, I think Jen asked something, and Jen talked about funding, having a project that supports women entrepreneurs. And their experience, what they had seen was that for a lot of them, they had registered their businesses in their husband's or their father's names. And as potential investors, there's not really much you can do with that because it's not collateral, or sorry, the business is not in their name. So how do we resolve that? So that's a question from Jen. And then George also had said that it would be good for us to look at both the cause and the effect. So you guys are from the effect perspective, but the causes, which is, I think, which he had talked about being poverty. But Charlotte also had told us that Harvest is not out to solve poverty in general, but just picking something specific. But George, would like to.
No, I said we are not out to manage, right?
To manage poverty.
Yeah. So yes, they should be sustainable interventions.
Okay. So I think what George is saying is that it's something that we should be looking at the same time. That poverty actually is the main reason why we are having challenges with access across, whether it's health, education. Poverty is responsible for that. Yeah. So your thoughts around that, because if women are setting up businesses and not setting up in their names, and they're setting in their spouse's name, their brother's name, their father's name, what do we think would be responsible for that? And so back to L&D now. Like I said earlier on, this platform is for L&D professionals. Is there something we can do as L&D professionals to work with changing the mindsets of some of these female entrepreneurs?
I think,
something. Yeah.
Yes. The first point I want to make, actually, and I always like to make this point before we get going, is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with women, right? As women, we shop the way we do because of the history of bias and prejudice. So when a woman encounters bias and prejudice, she adjusts herself, she's conditioned in her thinking. And so that's why, for instance, in this part of the world, I find it very funny that you have a big woman. When I say big woman, I mean a woman who is strong financially, has a business, and her husband, who plays absolutely no role in the business, is the chairman, and then she calls herself vice chairman. It's the same thing we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, we know that's what happens. It's the same thing. So it may not even be that the husband is saying, you can't set up this business unless it's in my name, but the woman just feels that the man gives her a cover. So we must educate women and get them to realize that you're not doing yourself any favors. We have to fire women's imagination and get them to dream big and to imagine, what is possible. So we can have female Dangotes out there. And when women start thinking like that and start dreaming, then they also become role models for younger women. And that's how we break this cycle, right? But women must learn to understand that we are masters of our own destiny. I think, as you talked about L&D, yes, it helps to change mindsets and also to paint pictures that fire women's imagination. So you realize that I can be an entrepreneur in my own right. I can have a chairman who doesn't have to be my husband. It can even be another man, but it doesn't have to be my husband. And on the male side, it's also helping the man be aware that your wife being successful is not a threat to you, because we do have some of that. I encounter women all the time who tell me I'm doing very well, but my husband is now feeling a bit intimidated. So we must also break the mindset on the side of the man, and L&D does that. But again, like I said, it's also about us using our privilege and our influence to be able to get people to think and see through a different lens and look through life through a different window, so that we start, if a woman wins, everybody wins. Because a woman, we know that a woman, the research says a woman will spend up to 90% of her income on the health, education, and benefits generally of her family and her community. She's not going to go out and spend that money on a woman outside or another man outside, right? It goes back into the family. I'm not taking the pot at the bed again. So when a woman wins, everybody wins. Because the children are better educated, the children, and then they bring up children who are better educated, more aware, and the cycle just goes on. So let's do the work, because everybody wins.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Sholakwe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to, overemphasize. She absolutely touched on it from both sides. But I think the only thing is, then for L&D purposes, how then do we take these conversations to where the women are again, right? And I've seen this happen. Mostly these conversations they are typically said in informal conversations, right? So nobody calls you to the classroom, or you see in a curriculum and people say, oh, well, men, don't be intimidated. It is, don't be, so, there's an essential need, for L&D to also bridge having these conversations, because they are valid, because they are mostly the soft things that are actually the hard things, right? For women setting up businesses, for women who, need to dare to be more ambitious and go all out and be who they. So I think creative ways of getting these conversations to the right places, to the right people being men and women here, because as Ivana established, it is a two-way thing, right? The men, we've seen men that would outrightly state that, you know what, you cannot be more successful than me. So whatever you're doing, just be measuring. If I'm here, don't be more than, so these are conversations that need to be taken out there. And I believe, and that's why I always celebrate the power of communities, right? Belonging to a community, for instance, the Rising Tide, belong to these communities where you realize that first, it's not a lone journey, you are not alone. And then secondly, you can share experiences, healthy experiences that helps us all grow as women and as men in the society.
All right, thank you very much for that. So I'm just checking the chat box for any other comments we might have missed or questions. Okay, and there isn't. So I know we have just a couple more minutes. And before I wrap up, so I want you, so Ivana, Sholakwe, what advice do you have for two sets of people? One for people like myself in the L&D community, and for the people I represent, the female entrepreneurs. And advice each for both, from both of you, and then we can wrap up.
So advice for L&D and advice for female entrepreneurs, did you say?
Yes, yes.
My advice to
Yes.
female entrepreneurs, let me start with that, is I think entrepreneurship is really all about dreams. It's about dreaming of a future, dreaming of what is possible, dreaming of a state of a future that is different from the status quo. My advice would be give yourself permission to dream big. And don't be afraid of failure, right? Because you could say to me, oh, but what if I fail? But the answer is, oh, but darling, what if you fly, right? There is no life without taking risk. So let's take risk. There can be educated risk, but let's not be afraid to take risk. And let us not be afraid to fail, because the only failure really is when you fall down and you don't get up. There's no big entrepreneur out there. If you talk about Jeff Bezos or, I don't know, Richard Branson or anybody else, they have many stories of failure behind them before they got to where they are today. So the fact that you're having a tough time and it's difficult, it's part of the process. And the other thing I would say also is build a tribe. You need your support network. So build your tribe before you need it. Have those people that can support you, that can challenge you, and you can test your ideas, bounce ideas off them. Make sure you have that support structure in place because you need it. And for the L&D, we want you to be more imaginative. We want you to challenge us who are going to sit in your classrooms, help us fire imagination, paint pictures, in our minds of a future that is possible, and be courageous in doing so. So that's my answer to the question.
Awesome. Did we miss Nneka? Okay, I'll just go ahead then. And I think, those are really spot on actually. And I'll just say that, for each side, that is L&D and entrepreneurs, to embrace each other. So by embracing each other, I'm saying that collaborate more, right? And then embracing each other again by being a bit of the other too, right? It is essential. So I don't know if there's any entrepreneur that is really thriving out there and is doing so without knowledge, right? I mean, it would be it's very rare. Okay, because even for an entrepreneur in the open markets, right, that you have to buy, you still need some knowledge to know where to get, the best bargains or so. How much more, entrepreneurs that are in the knowledge economy. So as an entrepreneur, right, while of course we know that our jobs are usually not clear cut, and especially if you are from a part of the country that infrastructure, both digital and physical, is a challenge. You deal with so much. Today you're an artisan, the next day you're a generator repairer, the following day, so embrace a lot of, for entrepreneurs, let's embrace a lot of knowledge, think like a researcher, ask why, look into the data. And then for L&D professionals too, let's embrace, some entrepreneurship spirit. And who is an entrepreneur? It's some resilience, it's a lot of resilience. And as Mr. Sage said, a lot of failing quickly, failing fast too, right? So let's do a bit more experimental, keep asking a lot of why, get real data out there, solve, like an entrepreneur. So we just need to embrace each other, like I said, work together collaboratively, and then take and feed off, some expected traits in each other as well. And you realize that, we're able to soar and then build solid global solutions for, of course, strong global problems. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ivana and Sholakwe. This has been so interesting. I can't even believe the time. It's almost 4:30 here in Nigeria. So from my taking from everything that the conversation we've had over the last 90 minutes or so. So for those that know me, they know I love acronyms. I learned the acronyms. So I have an acronym, and it's called DUSTY. So, when something is dusty. So we've been talking a lot about gender, breaking the barriers, parity, gaps, and all that. So as we look through the mirror, it's a very dusty mirror. So for me, the D there, the first D is that for all of us, so whether we're entrepreneurs running our businesses, whether we're L&D professionals, and most of us L&D professionals are actually entrepreneurs, the D there is to dream big. Okay, we cannot overemphasize that. We need to dream very, very big, very audacious dreams. The U is use. The use of our privilege, the use of the influence we have for good. So wherever we find ourselves, whatever platform, whatever position that we have, we need to speak more. We need to write more, be out there. And the S is for strategic networking and continuous learning. Okay, be very strategic about the circles that we find ourselves and the types of learning that we get into. And then the last T is for a tribe. For us to break this bias, we cannot do it alone. We need a tribe. We need to have a lot of, so I'm going to co-opt Mark. Mark is here. We need a lot of he for she's, men that are championing the cause of breaking that bias. The likes of George, who has said, Anna, I hope you're taking all George's comments. George is wondering whether everything that we discussed about gets to in Nigeria, we call them Oga at the top, so the bosses of the bosses. So we need to build a tribe where we have a lot of he for she's, where we have a lot of people that come together to support women to go into politics. Because when we have more women in politics, some of those archaic draconian laws that are there get thrown out. When we have women supporting other women to go into the corporate world and do things, magic happens. And then lastly, so the why. Just adding Sholakwe's why. Let's ask ourselves why. Why is this happening? Why do we keep having poverty? Why is it that there's so many programs for women, mentorship, development, and yet we're still where we are? Why are we not asking enough questions about what it is that we're doing? Why are learning and development professionals not doing more than they should? Why are female entrepreneurs feeling that, you know what, I need to bring myself down, and only till I bring myself down can I have a business that is up? So why? And the more we ask why, then the likelihood that we're able to peel the layers and get to find the real essence of what the issues are. And with that, it's 4:29. I want to say thank you very much for your time, Ivana and Sholakwe. This was a very interesting conversation. I can't believe that 90 minutes. I'm not sure if Sarah is still here. Sarah did justice with, setting the tone and tempo. And I'm handing back over to Anna.
Well, I just wanted to once again thank everyone for bringing up this very important topic. As we celebrate women specifically this month, although we should be definitely celebrating hardworking women throughout the year, right? And hopefully, and hopefully progress will be made to facilitate women's access to finance and for them to discover their voices and just be more successful as entrepreneurs, as human beings. So with that, I would like to wrap up the session. Once again, thank all the participants for interesting insights, as well as our panelists. I would like to continue that discussion at some point of time. I think it's important to focus, to focus on what is important. So that's what I wanted to say. Another thing is we would appreciate feedback. So if anyone who's still on the line could just click on the SurveyMonkey link, we would really appreciate your feedback and your takeaways from today's session. And one other thing is that our program, specifically the Grow Learn Connect platform, is working to facilitate, to help women be more successful as entrepreneurs, right, as businesses. And we're doing that through L&D professionals such as yourself. So again, make sure that you download the guide, which focuses on gender, on how you can facilitate how you can facilitate women's participation in your training programs, and let's make it happen. Let's help women be more successful in their lives and their careers. So thank you very much, everyone. For those of you who joined us from French-speaking countries, I just wanted to maybe very quickly update you about our upcoming webinars in French. Just very. I need to re-upload. Oh, that's the wrong one. Okay, never mind. So I just wanted to mention that we do have a couple of training sessions as well as webinars coming up in French. On March 28th, we will talk about creating the 24/7 classroom. So that will be the French equivalent of another English webinar that some of you might have attended. On April 25th, again, for the French-speaking community, we will have a roundtable discussion around coaching. And on May 26th, we will talk about blending learning options for the online classroom. Again, these sessions will be conducted in French. So we're trying to diversify our webinars and make them available for the French-speaking community as well. So having said that, once again, thank you to all the participants and the panelists, and we will join you. We will welcome you soon in April for our next webinar. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.